Welcome, restless souls, to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close. The candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carman's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carman's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. The metallic sweetness coated my tongue again, thick and cloying, like syrup mixed with copper pennies. It always came when the bitterness rose, that familiar surge of rage that everyone mistook for endless patience. They had no idea what lurked beneath Bev's perpetual smile. "We can always count on Bev," Margaret chirped from across the church fellowship hall, already approaching with that expectant look. Another weekend, another favor, another drop of poison in the well of my soul. The thing inside me stirred, unfurling like smoke. It had been growing for years now, feeding on every yes I couldn't bring myself to refuse, every boundary I failed to draw. What started as disappointment had metastasized into something else entirely, something that whispered dark suggestions when I lay awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of my empty house. I was 25 when the doctor delivered the news with clinical detachment. "Hostile uterine environment," he said, as if my body were a war zone. The irony wasn't lost on me. My womb rejected life, but my mouth could never reject a request for help. We tried fostering. Little Emma, with her gap-toothed smile and tangled hair, came to us on a Tuesday. By Friday, I knew the truth that everyone was too polite to say. You can't manufacture maternal love. It either blooms naturally or it doesn't. Mine was buried too deep under layers of resentment and grief to ever see sunlight. I tried to care for her, fed her, clothed her, went through the motions, but Emma was perceptive in the way damaged children learn to be. She watched me with those dark, knowing eyes, seeing through my performance to the hollow space where affection should have lived. I was distant, cold, going through the motions of motherhood without any of the feeling. After 3 months of my mechanical care, she was quietly transferred to another home. I felt nothing but relief. The marriage crumbled like old newspaper after that. David couldn't look at me the same way, knowing I'd failed at the most basic female function, not just bearing children, but loving them. He moved out on a Thursday, the same day Emma was transferred to another home. The house fell silent, except for the sound of that thing inside me, growing stronger. "Bev, honey, could you possibly..." Margaret's voice faded as the sweetness intensified. Behind her, I could see the other women watching, already planning to pile their requests on top of hers. The church potluck needed organizing. Mrs. Henderson needed someone to drive her to appointments. The Peterson twins needed babysitting while their parents took a long weekend. Always Bev. Always reliable, accommodating Bev. The thing in my chest stretched its limbs, pressing against my ribs from the inside. It had been patient, feeding on my suppressed fury for so long. But lately, it had been getting restless, hungry for more than just internal consumption. I felt my face arrange itself into that familiar mask of agreeability, even as something dark and sweet as molasses flowed through my veins. "Of course, Margaret, whatever you need." But this time, as the words left my mouth, I saw something flicker in Margaret's eyes, a brief moment of uncertainty, as if she'd glimpsed the thing that lived behind my helpful facade. The thing that was tired of being buried, tired of being denied, tired of watching life happen to everyone else while I cleaned up their messes. The sweetness on my tongue grew stronger, and for the first time in years, I smiled a real smile, because I finally understood what it was. Not disgust, but anticipation. The taste of something long denied, finally ready to feed. And there were so many people who had been counting on dear sweet Bev for so very long. They had no idea how eager I'd suddenly become to help. The first time it happened, I told myself it was an accident. Mrs. Patterson had called at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, her usual time for emergencies that weren't emergencies. Her cat was stuck in a tree again, and could I possibly come over with my ladder? The sweetness flooded from my mouth as I said yes, but this time it felt different, expectant. I found her in the backyard, gray hair still in curlers, looking up at Mittens with theatrical despair. "Oh, Bev, you're such a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you," the thing inside me purred. As I climbed the ladder, I felt its weight shifting in my chest, watching through my eyes. Mrs. Patterson stood below, chattering about her bridge club gossip, completely unaware that I'd stopped listening. The rung beneath my foot felt loose. Had it always been that way? My hand must have slipped when I tested it, because suddenly the metal was clattering to the ground. Mrs. Patterson's scream cut short with a wet thud. I called 911, of course, performed CPR like the good neighbor I was, cried real tears at the funeral. But underneath it all, the thing inside me was satisfied in a way I'd never felt before. For once, someone else's need had been permanently resolved. The taste lingered for days afterward, sweet and thick as honey. Margaret was next, though I didn't plan it that way. She had volunteered me to coordinate the entire fall festival. 3 weeks of work she had promised to the committee without asking me first. "Bev won't mind," she had said with that dismissive wave of her hand. "She loves keeping busy." I smiled and nodded while the sweetness built behind my teeth. Margaret lived alone in that big Victorian on Elm Street, the one with the tricky front steps that needed repair for months. She had mentioned it several times, always ending with a sigh about how she couldn't afford a handyman and didn't know who to trust. "I could take a look," I offered after church one Sunday, the words flowing like syrup. "I helped David with home repairs for years." Her face lit up with that entitled gratitude I knew so well. "Oh, Bev, would you? You're absolutely wonderful." The steps were easier to sabotage than I'd expected. A few strategic scratches with a screwdriver, weakening the wood just enough. Margaret was getting older. Her balance wasn't what it used to be. These things happen. She fell on a Tuesday morning, carrying her groceries. The broken hip led to complications, then infection, then a quiet slide into the forever sleep of morphine and machines. Her last words to me, whispered through oxygen tubes, were, "Thank you for everything, Bev. You're an angel." I held her hand as she died, feeling the thing inside me grow stronger with each fading breath. By the time I helped plan Margaret's funeral, I understood what I'd become. The other church ladies fluttered around me like moths, praising my strength, my devotion, my endless capacity for shouldering everyone's burdens. They had no idea they were feeding a predator that had learned to hunt in broad daylight, wearing the mask of Christian charity. The Peterson twins were getting difficult to manage during their parents' frequent date nights. Little Jake had started having nightmares about the dark lady who babysat them, though he could never explain what scared him. Children see things adults miss. They sense the wrongness that lurks beneath familiar faces. But their parents just saw reliable Bev, always available when they needed her. The thing inside me was patient now, well-fed and growing stronger. It no longer needed to rush. It could wait, plan, savor the anticipation. Each yes I gave was really a promise, not to help, but to eventually collect what was owed. Because after 37 years of giving and giving until there was nothing left, I'd finally learned the secret that no one teaches you about kindness. It's not renewable. Every favor extended, every boundary crossed, every piece of yourself sacrificed chips away at something essential. And when that something is finally gone, what grows in its place is hungry for recompense. The sweetness was constant now, coating every word, every smile, every helpful gesture. And why shouldn't it be sweet? After all these years of bitter disappointment, I was finally getting what I deserved. They could count on Bev, all right. They just had no idea what they were counting down to. 6 months later, the church was packed for my retirement celebration. After 40 years of service, they said, it was time for me to rest. The irony made the sweetness so thick I could barely swallow. Pastor Williams stood at the podium, recounting my selfless devotion to the community. Behind him, a memorial wall displayed photos of those we had lost. Mrs. Patterson, Margaret, the Henderson family, carbon monoxide leak, such a tragedy. Old Mr. Chambers fell down his basement stairs while I was helping him organize storage boxes, and 7 others whose needs I'd permanently resolved. Bev has been the heart of our congregation, the pastor continued, his voice thick with emotion. Through every crisis, every loss, she's been our rock. When the Peterson family died in the terrible car accident, a sob caught in his throat. He didn't know I'd loosened their brake lines while helping change their oil. The twins had stopped having nightmares about the dark lady, at least. Bev was there to comfort us all. She organized meals. She cleaned the house for the funeral. She even adopted Mrs. Patterson's cat when no one else would. Mittens purred in my lap, the only witness to my true nature. Animals understand predators instinctively. He had stopped trying to run away months ago, resigned to his fate as my companion in this beautiful deception. The congregation erupted in applause. Faces beaming with gratitude and affection surrounded me. These lovely people who'd fed me their problems for decades, never suspecting they were fattening themselves for slaughter. But as I smiled and nodded, accepting their praise, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Little Emma sat in the back row, the foster child I couldn't love, now grown into a woman with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. She had been watching the memorial wall, her gaze moving methodically from photo to photo, then settling on me. with an expression I recognized all too well. The sweetness in my mouth turned bitter as acid. She stood up slowly, began walking down the aisle, while Pastor Williams droned on. The thing in my chest, which had grown so fat and content, suddenly cowered like a beaten dog, because Emma's eyes held the same darkness mine did, the same hungry patience, the same sweet anticipation. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the pastor's speech like a blade. "I'd like to say something about dear Bev." The congregation turned expectantly, smiling at the pretty young woman who wanted to honor their beloved saint. "You see," Emma continued, her smile widening, "Bev inspired me to learn everything I know about helping people, about being the person everyone can count on." She reached the front of the church, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. Her fingers were cold as winter. She showed me that some people take and take until there's nothing left, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to help them stop. The congregation murmured appreciatively, not understanding, but I did. Oh, I understood perfectly. "The funny thing about foster care," Emma whispered, leaning close to my ear so only I could hear, "is that it teaches you to study people very carefully, to watch for the signs that someone might hurt you." Her grip tightened on my shoulder. "I've been watching you for 20 years, Bev, following your helpful little trail across this town. You did such a thorough job cleaning up after yourself, except for one tiny detail." My heart hammered against my ribs. The thing inside of me whimpered. "You kept trophies, a button from Mrs. Patterson's sweater, and her cat, Margaret's reading glasses, little Jake Peterson's toy car." Her smile was radiant as sunrise. "I found them all when I broke into your house last week. I was planning to add you to my own collection of all the families that had rejected me, but then I realized something much more delicious. The sweetness was gone now, replaced by the copper taste of pure terror. Why dirty my hands when I could just let justice do the work for me? So I photographed everything, sent anonymous tips to 3 different police departments, and I planted just enough additional evidence to make sure they'd find it all." Her voice dropped as she continued to whisper, "I wanted to watch your face when you realized you'd been caught by the child you threw away." She straightened up, her public voice returning, warm and caring. "Thank you, Beth, for showing me my true calling. I've already found my first project. That lovely young family that just moved in next door to you, they have the most adorable baby." Emma stepped back and began clapping, her applause echoing through the church. The congregation joined in, a thunderous ovation for their beloved saint. But all I could hear was the sound of my own reckoning, served sweet and cold by the one child I couldn't learn to love, the one who had learned to recognize a predator from those 3 cold months under my roof. As the sirens wailed in the distance, right on schedule, I finally understood the cosmic truth. After decades of helping others, someone had finally decided to help me. Help me straight to hell. The last thing I tasted was bitterness, sharp and clean, as Emma's laughter joined the chorus of praise surrounding my destruction. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your own mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media. Who knows, your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's crypt, every fear comes alive, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.